My name is Sean Mullen. I'm with Surgent EA Exam Review. We're a proud partner with Jackson Hewitt and have been now for 14 years, providing enrolled agent exam prep to the tax professionals at Jackson Hewitt. Going to just go through a couple of housekeeping items for you all. Starting with on your control panel for Zoom, you have the ability to type in questions along the way. So if you have questions, please feel free to type those in. We'll try to answer as many as possible. I know there are going to be 70 plus tax professionals joining our webinar today. So it might be tough to get to all the questions if we get a lot of them, but we'll try and do as many as we can. Joining me is Dr. Anthony Curatola out of Drexel University. Tony is the course author for the Enrolled Agent Exam Review and has been since its inception in 2004. Tony, in addition to teaching graduate and undergraduate taxation courses at Drexel, is the author of, Tony, I've lost count, at least a dozen plus continuing education courses. Is that probably an accurate number? Give or take a couple hundred?
Yeah, something. Yeah, no, it's just about 10, 15.
Okay. Tony is an expert in the areas of retirement taxation, tax research. Just taxation in general. He's also the tax editor for Strategic Finance magazine, and I can only think of a couple hundred accolades that I'm probably missing there, Tony, in the 20 plus years you and I have known each other. But we are honored that Tony is the author for our course, and it's not important to pay attention to what I talk about today, but listen to what Tony has to say, because you will not find a better expert on the enrolled agent exam anywhere in America for my money. So with that, it looks like we're just getting now to the top of the hour. So welcome again to all of you. And again, what you can do is type in your questions using the chat feature. And if any questions pop up, we will address those as they come up. All right. So far, no questions. So I think I put everyone to sleep. So first of all, I think as a preamble to this whole thing, there's a lot of, let's call it misunderstanding that goes with the enrolled agent exam. For a lot of people, depending on an enrolled agent with whom they've spoken in the past, they could view this exam as trying to climb Everest. And very candidly, the old enrolled agent exam, which I want to say the old enrolled agent exam is pre-2006, was an exam where you had to take all exam sections at once. It was back then, it was 4 exam sections, and it was held once every 2 years. And tax professionals would go to an IRS location and for 2 days slug through this test. And to study for this exam, it used to be that the IRS would provide you with 140 plus IRS forms, publications, instructions, and that is how you studied for the exam. There really wasn't a lot of review material out there. So back then, the enrolled agent exam had a very, very low pass rate, and people that are my age, Tony's age, and that maybe have sat for that exam, they paid their price to earn that credential. They clearly have earned their stripes. But starting in 2007, the enrolled agent exam became computerized. And when it became computerized, you didn't have to study for all 3 parts. When it became a 3-part exam at that point, you didn't have to study for all 3 parts at once. You could study for just 1 part at a time. And when you passed 1 part, you had 2 years to pass the remaining 3 parts. So lo and behold, the pass rates on the exam went up rather dramatically during that time. So the enrolled agent exam today, you could thank your lucky stars that you're young enough or haven't wanted to sit for the exam until now, because it's far more manageable. So if you are worried that this is a very daunting exam that has a very minuscule pass rate, that is absolutely not the case. The pass rates are well over 65% now across all 3 exam sections, possibly even higher now in parts 1 and 3 of the exam. So it is very, very much a very passable exam if you put in the required effort. So this is not osmosis. You have to put in the effort. And where a lot of people will pass on trying to do this exam is they'll look at these review courses out there and realize that they're looking at 500 to 700 hours of total study to get through the exam because there's so much to cover. But we're going to talk about Surgent and its adaptive learning technology and how we can get you through this exam in about 200 hours of study, if not less. And if you start on it now, you can get this exam passed by the end of this year. So let's get going. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Tony. So why did we come up with this course? Well, I started out, before Surgent acquired this course, I actually had the course through a company called Exam Matrix that I formed in 2004. And when I started the company, and I had known Tony for a number of years, we knew we wanted to get into this market with this exam review. And we knew that adaptive learning, which we were pioneering at Exam Matrix at the time, was the perfect tool to use for this exam because it allowed the students not to just study everything, which seems like what you have to do for this exam, but make you study more on your weaker areas. So the adaptive learning with this course would automatically focus your studying to your problem areas. So you work more in those areas, and that allows you to decrease your study time, but not just simply study things that you already know. And as a result of all that, you increase the pass rates for the exam. All right. So this is called the Surgent ASAP technology, Advanced Study Accelerated Performance Technology. And what it has done is, since Surgent acquired the course in 2015, they have put millions of dollars into the course technology to create this ASAP technology platform, which took my adaptive learning technology and took it to the next level. All right, so we're gonna go in and we're going to demonstrate the course here very quickly. So let me go into this. Tony, again, being my guinea pig, do you see where it says now let's set up a spending schedule?
Nope, I just see your first screen.
Well, I'm gonna do this here. How about that?
There we go.
There we go. All right. So the algorithm in the course is a factoring of your effort, your study time, the day you want to take your test, and the days that you want to study. So all that data is factored in to create a study plan for you. So you'll first start out by choosing an exam date. So right now I've got July 23rd as my exam date, and I can make it any date I wanted to. So let's say 49 days out, okay? Then it wants to know how many days per week are you going to study. Now, the reality is that the less days per week I want to study, the more of a burden I have of studying per day. The more days per week I study, the less of a burden I have of studying per day, as you see right here. But in reality, you don't want to study 7 days a week for this test, because if you're studying 7 days a week, what you're really doing is you're studying 49 consecutive days for the exam, or 50 days, whatever it's going to be. And nobody wants to do that. That quickly becomes a jail sentence. So this exam is manageable enough that you should be able to pass this exam with doing studying 5 or 6 days a week, and not a lot of studying per day, but you know, enough to get you to the exam ready to take it and pass. So I recommend students give themselves at least 1, if not 2 days off per week to study. Okay, it's up to you, but at least do that. And this way, you know, then Thursday can be the day I mow the lawn, or Thursday can be the day that I make sure I'm taking my wife out to dinner, because we have 4 kids, and sometimes it's nice to have dinner at a restaurant that doesn't use crayons with their menu. So for those reasons, I would like to give myself a couple days off per week. Okay, all right. So I'll plug in those dates, and you're not locked into it. You can always go back and change that later. But what that does is that kind of puts into play the adaptive learning platform of the software. So we're going to start out with an assessment quiz in the course. So I'm going to stop right there, and I'm going to tell you that we capitalize on the fact that we're going to teach you this content through the use of multiple choice questions. Now, we have other exam prep courses at Surgent. We're certified public accountant, certified management accountant, certified control auditor. And for all those courses, we have a textbook that goes with it. So if someone's, let's say, struggling with earnings per share in CPA, we could give them more content in earnings per share, you know, in a textbook to go to. When we were coming up with this course, and immediately I thought, okay, we'll have to make a book for it. Tony and I were discussing, and Tony said, no, we're not going to do a book. because the exam is based on the IRS publications. So, like you got your Pub 17 and exciting ones like that. And then you have, like for part 3 of the exam, you have Circular 230. And so all these review courses out there that had been in this market, what they were doing is basically taking what was content already in these publications and trying to condense it down into a textbook. But now what they're doing is they're reducing the ability to learn the content. So Tony said, if we use the IRS pubs with this course, and then for every question, we explain the question back to the pub, which is the basis for every question, we're going to have a much better course. So I immediately said, no, wait a minute. We're going to have 1,500 plus multiple choice questions. You mean to tell me you're going to update every question every year to the IRS pub? And Tony said, absolutely. Well, I thought that was an impossible task, but turns out some people like to memorize these publications like Tony. So that's what we did. And admittedly, folks, it's been the smartest thing we ever did. In my years of owning Exam Matrix, that decision is what put us on the map with our enrolled agent exam review. Because now this concept that we all have, well, to learn a topic, I have to first go to the book and I have to learn, and I have to do practice questions. Well, this exam is multiple choice questions, and none of us are doing taxes right now using multiple choice questions where you're using tax returns, we're doing tax forms. So we're already in a new dynamic anyway. And if we're in a new dynamic, then we might as well try and make the teaching as effective as possible. So we'd rather teach you the content as it relates to the exam through a multiple choice question, because at the end of the day, that's how you're going to be tested, through a multiple choice question. If I were to, try and give you, a question on pass-through entities, if you had learned the content through a multiple choice question, you can apply the logic. But if you learned it in, let's say, just a textbook or something like that, then you have to take what you learned and synthesize it and process it back into an output that equals one of those 4 multiple choice answers out there. So we're trying to shorten that recall of knowledge by using the questions this way. Now, having said that, Tony is in the middle right now of creating videos for this course. So we will be adding videos as an optional add-on in the late summer or early fall. And the reason why we're doing the videos is we've had a lot of people enroll in this course that have never done a tax return in their life. They retired from IBM or JCPenney or some other company and just want to do taxes on the side, and they decided they needed to become an enrolled agent. Well, lo and behold, you have to kind of know a few things about taxes along the way. So for that reason, we're offering these videos. But I would say to the seasoned tax professional, like all of you are, the video is probably something you would never need to be able to pass this exam. Okay, so got that out of the way. I've explained why we don't have books. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to use the questions in 3 different ways. Number 1 is through an assessment. We're going to give you, for each of the 3 exam sections of the enrolled agent exam, an assessment of 150 questions broken out as 5 quizzes of 30 questions each. Those questions will come across all the categories tested within that exam section. So part 1 of the exam, which is individual taxation, we're going to give you 150 questions across all 5 categories. And the distribution across those 5 categories will be based initially upon the weighting of those categories by the IRS, because the IRS doesn't test an equal percentage in every category. They test more in some areas and less in others. So we follow that same recipe with our algorithm here. So when we do the assessment, we're going to give you 150 questions that then measure out to the weighting of the actual exam. But after you've finished those 150 questions, and now we know what your strengths and weaknesses are, the software will begin to create study sessions for you. So if you say, I want to study 30 questions, it's going to pick 30 questions for you across all the categories in part 1. And in this case, which is what I'm in right now. And those 30 questions will be chosen based upon your previous studying history and also the weightings of the categories. So if everybody on this webinar, and we have 84 joining us today, we all started at the same time. We all did the assessment at the same time and saw the same questions in the assessment. When we get to this next phase, which we call the study phase, every session we do with 10, 30, or 50 questions, our question distribution will be different for every one of us because each one of us is having it being tailored to what our specific learning needs are. So that's how we use those questions next, is to have you study more questions in the categories where you're struggling. And then lastly, we're going to use those questions for practice mode. When you have completed the studying of the course, and for us, the studying is answering all the multiple choice questions correctly at least one time and averaging at least a minute per question. When you've done that, then the next step is to start doing practice exams, because this is a 3.5-hour test. And let's be honest, the last time most of us took a 3.5-hour test, for me, it wasn't even college. It was back in high school when I took the SATs and the ACTs. That's the last time I took a test that was that long. Actually, maybe an AP exam might have been that long as well, but that's the last time. And so now I'm 51 years old. I haven't been in a classroom in almost 3 decades. So my ability to do test taking now is probably diminished. So we have a testing feature that will set up dynamic exams that mimic the question count, the weighting, the distribution of across the categories, and the time limit of the actual IRS enrolled agent exams. So we'll use this final week of studying to get you into the mode of being ready to go through a 3.5-hour test of 100 questions. Okay. Got my first question here. Let me just look at it real quick. Jada, I have not set up a time to take the first part of the test. I was understanding that I could choose my own dates. Is that not correct? No, Jada, it is correct. You can choose your exam date. So the testing window for the enrolled agent exam goes from May 1 to February 28th of the following year, if it's a leap year, February 29th. So right now, in 2018, they started testing last month on May 1, and they will continue to test you February 28th of 2019. In that time frame, you can sit for any of the 3 exam sections, each of 3 exam sections a maximum of 3 times. So if you had set for an exam section, let's say 3 times between May, June, and August, and you didn't pass it any of those 3 times, you would have to wait to take that exam section again the following May. And at that point, it'll be testing on new content, because the way the enrolled agent exam works is they test on the tax content that was just wrapped up in tax season. So right now, this testing window that started in May 1 is testing on content that applies to the 2017 tax returns that you all just did. It's not testing on the Tax Relief and Jobs Act that was signed by the president at the end of December. That content will not be tested until next May. So if you're worried about all the changes in the tax law as it relates to corporate tax and some of the pass-through entities and what have you, and it's daunting. I know Tony's rubbing his hands together thinking of all the money he's going to make on royalties for all these new courses. Take the enrolled agent exam in 2018. And that's just not my advice. That's the advice of anyone that's thinking about this exam, because they just don't want to have to relearn so much content. Okay? So if you're going to take the exam, by golly, get a foot on it and start studying for it now and get through it. At least get through parts 1 and 2. All right. So we're going to go into assessment. As I said, assessment is 5 quizzes. So up here on the top right, you see these shaded bars. The first one is shaded. That represents 30 questions. I've done 30 questions to the first one, and I'm 9 questions through the second one at this point. So you don't have to do 30 questions at a time. You can come and go as often as you like, but I think 30 questions is not a lot to ask for a person. Get through 30 questions a day in 5 days. You'll have your assessment. Then you'll have a very good understanding of what your strengths and weaknesses are. Okay. So I'm going to click start, and this will take me right where I left off. Now, little preamble here. The enrolled agent exam, which is authored by Prometric with the close scrutiny of the Internal Revenue Service, uses questions submitted by enrolled agents, but they also invoke the help of psychometricians who help make sure questions are written in a way so that there is a mathematical probability that X% are going to choose answer A versus B versus C versus D. So, in other words, I'm trying to say that the IRS is going to write these questions in a way that is potentially going to trip you up. And if you look at this question that you see right here, you're going to see that there's a lot of numbers involved. I've got January 14th, I've got August 10th, October 1st, November 1st. I've got $500, $5,000, $1,000. Two of those are losses. One of those is the gain. The IRS is trying to put all these numbers and dates in there to try and trip you up. So when you attack a question, the first thing you want to do is not read the entire question, but read the stem, which is the last sentence before the colon or the question mark. How should HERP's capital gains losses be initially reported on Schedule D? So you're just looking for capital gains and losses. That's what you're looking for here. Anything else is not relevant to this. So when you look at the question, and it could be fairly straightforward, but then you look at the answer choices, you can see that you see similar numbers. You've got 4,500 long-term loss, 4,000 long-term loss, and 500 short-term loss. You see these different mathematical probabilities or possibilities of getting to what is 4,500. So you've got 5,500 and 1,000 here. So they're trying to make you do the math in your head up on this question above, and then make you fall in love with an answer without thoroughly reading through all four answer choices. So those of you taking notes at home, your first lesson, make sure you thoroughly read this question and know what's being asked by starting out with the stem, as I said right here. And then make sure you realize what is relevant and not relevant to the answering of the question. And then, even if you fall in love with answer choice A, read through all four answer choices to make sure you have, in fact, chosen the correct answer. Tony, I'm going to let you chime in here. I can't even begin to count the number of questions we have on our course that are IRS enrolled agent previous exam questions where they've done exactly that type of thing. They've tried to trip you up and make you fall in love with answers.
Well, the original banks or information was available as about 1,200 questions out of the almost 1,900 questions we have. But even with the original ones, because tax law has changed significantly over the years, we've had to modify several of those pre-existing questions. So that part's true. The other thing I would mention, as you say, they go out of their way to trick you. I don't know that I would totally agree with that because there's two elements involved here. First of all the questions are not calculations. Many of them are actually thought questions, and they're straightforward. They basically are testing whether or not you know that area.
Right. So when you say a thought question, that's like a question that the answers are like, a sentence or one-word answer. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. One might turn around and say a long-term capital gain is less than a year, greater than a year, 1 year. Could be any one of those types of four questions. Those are thought questions. They're not all calculations. So it does make a big difference that you'll see a number of those kind of questions there.
Right.
Then the other second part you have to be careful of, and this is where Sean and I agree, I call them tricky type questions. You could read a question and there literally could be two correct answers. However, one, I would argue, is more correct. And that's the one that gets you credit. And, again, it just depends how you want to look at it, whether it's tricky or not tricky. It's more a question of if you don't read all the answers, sometimes you just pick the one and you would argue, well, that's correct. And the answer is, yeah, it's correct, but it's not the best answer. And that's the one that does count. So you do have to be just a little bit careful. And the other part I would mention, Sean's already mentioned, you got 3 hours to do it or 3.5 hours. Don't let that bother you at all. Almost everyone that I've talked with, and we've talked with a lot of people that have taken it afterwards, have come back and have assured us they did not spend the full 3 hours there. They were able to sit down, go through the material, and quite honestly be done in way less than 3 hours. So the time element is probably not an issue for you. So put that out of your head. And again, the last thing I would comment, don't worry about getting 100. Your objective is to pass the test. They're not going to tell you how many you got right. They're just going to tell you whether you passed or didn't pass. So the only issue is to pass it. And there's going to be some questions there that are not graded. Sean will mention it, I'm sure, later on, but they have what they call exploratory questions that they're in. And some people have come back and said, you didn't mention this. And you go, the question probably wasn't even graded. They could ask a question for absolutely no reason than to just basically see whether or not it's general knowledge that the majority of people know or don't know.
Right.
And you see that periodically as well.
When people start seeing child tax credit questions on the corporate section of the exam, and they contacted us, we assured them those were practice questions for the IRS.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
And it's when you were discussing about the fact that you could have multiple answers that could in fact be correct. That's part and parcel with this exam. The very experienced tax professionals will see a question and they'll realize that there's an answer there that's even better than the 4 that are provided. And they'll call us up and say, this question's wrong. The correct answer should be this. And we'll say, well, and from a tax standpoint, that's correct, but that's not what they're asking. They're saying for the 4 that are there, which is the best answer. And I always like to use this generic, very simplified analogy for that. 4 pies out there: apple, cherry, blueberry, rum raisin, which is the very best pie. And Tony and I would say to each other, oh, none of them, it's pecan pie. Well, possibly it is pecan pie, but pecan pie wasn't one of the answer choices, was it, Tony? So
no.
So we have to explain this to the seasoned tax professionals, and that's when the heads start hitting the desk in frustration. That why would they do a test that way? Well, who knows?
And the other problem too is it's pecan pie, not pecan. Grow up.
Here we go. Thank you, Tony. All right. So let's say we all agree that the answer is going to be 4,000 long-term loss and 500 short-term loss. So you submit the answer, and once you submit the answer, then the screen is going to change, and you're going to move to what we call the answer screen. So the answer screen starts off. You'll see that the screen is split, and on 2/3 over on the right side, we tell you whether you're correct or incorrect, and then this is where having Tony as our author pays huge dividends, everyone. And I cannot stress this enough. Look at the amount of depth Tony will go into on this explanation. And this is common in these type of questions, that he will go into this much explanation for the students. Because remember, we're not starting you out in a textbook, just watching, reading a textbook for the sake of reading it. We're starting on the question. So we want to use these questions not only to test and diagnose, we clearly want to use these questions to teach you the content. And so because of that, what Tony does is he goes into great lengths. And notice that it starts out by referring to Pub 17, pages 108 and 109, that it defines what is and is not a capital asset. So right there, the teaching begins at that point. And because it's referring to IRS Pub 17, pages 108 and 109, you can actually go and access those pubs. So here at the top of the screen, there's a little button that says IRS Publications. If I click on that, I've got my Forms, Instructions, Publications. I click View for Publications. There's my Pub 17. I click View right there, and it will open it up as a PDF right there. So all the IRS pubs, all the questions are referenced back to an IRS pub, because the enrolled agent exam is based on the IRS pubs. People will try and tell you it's based on the Internal Revenue Code, but it's actually the basis of the exam is more than just the code. It's the foundation of these publications. All right. So let's say that you've got to this point in the question, and let's say you got it wrong. Okay. As a foundation of progressing towards being ready to sit for the exam, this is where you should do a quick biopsy of this question in terms of why did you get it wrong. And if you get this question wrong, it's going to fall into one of 3 buckets, okay? Bucket A is you just don't know the information. Capital gains and losses, I don't remember that. Hopefully you're not going to be in that boat, but let's say you are. That's fine. There's going to be a knowledge gap, especially in part 2 of the exam, which is corporations, where you're just not going to know a lot of the content. And that's why you're here to learn. So not a problem. But the second reason you're going to get a question wrong is you misread the question. You missed a date or a word or a number, a dollar amount. The word not or the word except on an related exam question completely changes the meaning of the question. Those questions where, where all but one, where you have 3 answers that are correct and 1 is incorrect. If you don't catch that in the question, you're going to see that first answer choice and go, oh yeah, that's it, and answer it, only to realize that it was A, B, and C together, and that D was all the above, or D was none of the above, or something like that. And so for all those reasons, you want to slow down and make sure you're understanding what's being given to you. And then the last reason why you could get a question wrong is that you zip through the answer choices down here. And again, you notice how there's just kind of a similar, wording here: $4,500 long-term loss, $4,000 long-term loss, $4,500 long-term loss. So $4,500 long-term loss is an A and C together as the beginning of the sentence. If you don't thoroughly read through the answer choice, you could read the first 4 words and go, yep, that's it, and hit it, only to realize that maybe there was a better answer, but you didn't read through all of them. So for all those reasons, slow down. So yes, we'll give you the explanation as you see over here, and then we'll show you how other students have done on the question, as you see right there. Let's do one more quick question here to show you another feature here. All right, so 2 things we're going to show you. Let's say you're looking at this question, you have no idea what the answer is. Absolutely none. So you're going to take a wild guess. You're going to say A. The problem with taking a wild guess is our diagnostics. If you take a wild guess, you get this question correct, the software is going to think you know the answer to this question. And because of the way our adaptive learning works, you're going to see this question less often going forward than you would if you had answered it incorrectly. So when you come across questions like this, and you can't even do some logical choice to say, well, it can't be 2,700. There's no way it can't. There's no way it's that. If you can't even go there, you're just looking at this, and it could be Greek, and you could be more confused. But you want to click this mark as guessed up at the top, and it will mark the question wrong automatically. So I said A, and it actually was A. But so even though here it says correct, in my scoring, it's marking it as incorrect because I took the time to do that, and you're going to want to do that as well. Okay? All right. So the foundation of the learning is not coming from a textbook. It's coming from first the multiple choice questions, and then with the multiple choice questions, the reading from the IRS pubs that you see right here. All right? So let's get out of here. We're going to exit the session now. I'll say yes. And as I said, you have to go through 150 questions in assessment to move on to the next section. We're going to just temporarily, we're going to pretend that we have finished our assessment. So I'm going to move some real estate around here. So I'm going to exit my assessment here.
By the way, I'm going to mention at this moment that when you go through this program, you may notice a couple questions and you'll say, wow, this is the same question, the name change, something like that, minor differences. There's 2 issues to keep in mind. Number one, we're basically telling you that's a hot area. That's an area that they just love to test, and that's why you're going to see the question more than once. Secondly, you can change 1 or 2 words in those kind of presentations, and the answer changes. So just be aware of it. Don't think, gee, he has no idea what he's doing. I want to assure you, we spent a lot of time when we were developing this. So it's intentional.
Very, very good point, Tony. We've had students come back and tell us that they saw 2 of the same questions on the exam, and we came back and said, were they exactly the same, or was it word for word? And then they started to realize that maybe there was a slight word changing, or maybe it was this or that, and that's what they do. They absolutely want to put you in a position where if you don't take the time to read thoroughly through that question, you could potentially miss something. All right. So I've now moved into the next phase of studying, which is what we call your daily search. This is the practice. So remember we put in our test date and we put in the days of the week that we wanted to study right here. Well, based upon that, the software is using the algorithm for the adaptive learning, and it is choosing what I need to be doing next. So in this study box over on the left that's called the study session, it's taken my previous studying history. All right, everything I've done in my assessment, plus any studying I've done since then, and it is putting together in sessions of 10, 30, or 50 questions, sessions that I should be doing for studying that have the perfect recipe of questions based upon my needs. So let's say I have an hour after dinner, I can knock out 30 questions probably by clicking on 30, and it would generate a study session for me automatically. And these sessions of 10, 30, or 50, it's using data that's coming from this progress report right here. So up at the top right, you see like a little head hiding behind a book. I'll click on progress report, and it's going to show me the major categories. So category 1 is preliminary work taxpayer data. Category 2 is income and assets. Category 3, deduction of credits. Taxation by specialized returns for individuals. So each one of those major categories is weighted on the exam. So it might be that preliminary work taxpayer data might be 15% of the test, but income and assets is 25% of the test. So because it's 25% of the test, you're going to see more questions in that area. So for each one of these major categories, for the category overall, we'll give you an overview that shows you what your average score is, how many questions there are, how many you've answered correctly. And that's important because, again, we want you to answer every question correctly at least one time as part of your studying for this exam. And then your training score, questions not seen, total attempts, and total time studying. But then within that category, so in this case, preliminary work and taxpayer data, we drop it down into the subtopics of the exam. So preliminary work tax returns is that first topic under category 1, and taxpayer data is the second topic. So I can go through and see not only how I'm doing in the category as a whole, but how I'm doing in the subtopics. So in this case, you see I'm scoring 57% from a trending score, and a trending score means my more recent study history, which is a better indication of how I'm actually doing. So I'm doing okay in the category, but it's the preliminary work tax returns where I'm doing great. It's the taxpayer data where I'm absolutely struggling. So as a result, the courses are going to give me more questions in taxpayer data going forward than in preliminary work and tax returns. So that's how you see down here for all the different categories where we're collecting the data to then generate these study sessions for you in your session right here. Okay? So when you get to this part of the course, what the algorithm has done now is it's managing your studying for you. It's choosing what you need to study, how much you need to study. And so every study session you do, be it 10, 30, or 50 questions, you're getting the perfect balanced diet of questions to study. Remember, it's not just to answer the questions for the sake of answering them. It's to attack the question and learn from the question. Now, having said that, it's not always great to study with adaptive learning. Like if you saw my scoring in that first category, I've got a pretty big discrepancy between my category 1A, the first topic, and 1B, the second topic in preliminary work and taxpayer data. So I'd like to actually go in and not study from all the different categories, but I'd rather just go in right now and study just in that one category, preliminary work taxpayer data. So I can click on that category as I'm doing here, and that gives me a drop down. So now I have the two content areas, preliminary work tax returns, which is topic A, and then taxpayer data, which is topic B. Remember, the first one, A, I was scoring 80%. I'm doing great in that. Taxpayer data, I was like at 37%. That's where I'm struggling. So there's 37 questions available in that area. What I want to do is I want to click on this pencil, and that will allow me to do a study session just in that topic. So now that I've done it, I can choose how many questions I want to see, 5, 10, 25, 50, or I can even go to specific question numbers. So let's say we're going to do 10 questions. And then for those questions, I can condition them. I can say, I want them to be generated to me based on the adaptive learning algorithm. So the questions I'm getting wrong, I'll see those first, and the questions I've answered incorrectly multiple times will be the first ones I see, and then those questions that I maybe seen twice and answered it correctly once and not correctly once, those will become next, and then et cetera, et cetera. Or I could say, no, I don't want the algorithm in there. I just want to see all the questions, and that will allow you to do it. You can also say, I want to just see new questions. So there's 37 questions. I've seen 6. I could do new questions, and I would see 31 questions that I haven't seen before. Or I could go least seen, which is the questions I've just seen the least number of times. And then from there, there's trouble questions, which are questions where I'm getting the answer wrong at least 50% of the time. And then there's missed last time seen, which is exactly like it sounds. I attempted the question, I got it wrong, I want to see that question again. So that's the great thing about this course, is that you can actually go in and, like a surgeon, sculpt exactly what you need to go in and go after and study very effectively. And then when you've chosen how you want your session to go, you can click begin session. And then the nice thing about this is, if you like, you can hide the answers until the end. Generally, when you're doing this type of focus session, I recommend not doing that. You want to, for every question, you really want to see whether you're right or wrong, and then use those extra components like the IRS publications to help you. Okay? All right. So that's how the 2 ways you can do your studying moving forward. You can do the algorithm, the adaptive learning, the autopilot, the GPS, whatever you want to call it, where it's going to choose what you need to study and you just do that. And I can tell you that probably 95% of our students just do that. They never deviate from that because the algorithm is doing the job it's supposed to be doing. It's making them go back and focus more on the problem areas. Okay? But at any time you want to break away from that, you can. And if you do those focus study sessions in the specific areas, the great thing about that is the software records all the scoring you did with that. And so once you come back to doing the adaptive learning sessions, all that extra studying you did in those focused areas is factored into the algorithm as you go forward. Okay? All right. Once you're about halfway through your studying, so this is 664 questions. When you're about 320, 330 or so questions, you can try doing your first practice exam. And with your first practice exam, it's going to be a time test, like all of them are going to be. So it's 100 questions. If you get to question 92 and you run out of time, question 92 up to 100, all those are going to be marked wrong, just like in the actual exam. So we will actually model the timing, the question count, the weighting of the actual exam to get you to that game shape. And it's a dynamic exam, so it's pulling from the entire database. You'll never have 2 exams exactly the same. All right? So we're teaching you through the multiple choice questions. We're bringing the IRS pubs up as necessary. You can access the IRS pubs right here as well from the main menu, clicking on IRS publications. But another feature I want to show you is called the session results log. This allows you to go back in and look at any study session you've done over time. So, we did a session on the 21st, and that was 30 questions, and, here's me answering A on all of them. But let's say we want to look at this one right here, this one that we did on 12/12/2017. So I'll click View, and it will show me broken out on the top the questions that I answered correctly, and at the bottom, incorrectly, then the questions on the bottom are the ones I answered correctly. So this was a long time ago. I don't remember that question, but I can click on it, and it will bring that question back up for me, showing me what the question was, what my answer choice was, what the correct answer was, as well as the explanation right here. So when you do a practice exam, it's not going to be like studying where you answer a question and you see the answer afterwards. You just mow through all 100 questions. So this feature allows you to go back in and look at every question you did in a practice exam and make sure that you know why the answer is correct and why you got it wrong. All right. So same thing here, whether it's a correctly answered question or an incorrect answered question, you can go back and review all of them one at a time. All right, Tony, what would you like to add here? What am I missing?
I'm just sitting here at the moment. I'd say you've hit all the issues. I think one of the things that's important to highlight, you're working with a computer and doing this exam or doing the study session. That actually prepares you for when you go and take the actual exam, because it's also a computer you'll be working with. And what we have found out, and now I've said this before, in my classes at Drexel, once upon a time, I took two classes. One, they learned on a computer, the class I was teaching, and the other group learned through the reading of a book. But in both cases, they both got the exams on the computer. People that studied on the computer and did the exam on the computer actually statistically did better than the other students. Now, it didn't hurt their grades. They knew it going in. But the fact of the matter was they didn't feel alienated when they sat down in front of the computer. And depending on your age, many of us, we sit down in front of a computer, take an exam, and I have to take them all the time down at school and whatever. You know, I'm a little bit older. It's still not my favorite pet, even though I work on it. And many of the students will come back and say, you know what, just knowing what the exam would be like and being on a computer, I felt more confident. And I think that's another important attribute to this program that Sean and his company have actually developed.
Well said. No, I'm going to use a car analogy here. My first car, I'm proud to say, was a Ford Pinto 1979. And I made sure nobody hit me from behind. But if there was a problem with that car, there would be a little light of an engine that would show up, and then I'd have to take that to a mechanic, and they'd have to basically start taking the car apart to figure out what was going on. Fast forward, 15 years later, you could, have a diagnostic code. So you could take it in, the technician would hook up the computer and give you a P0031, which is the O2 sensor in the right engine bank is failing. And then you would know what to do to what has to be fixed. Using that to the EA exam, the old way was reading the publications, which is the 79 Pinto. You don't know what's wrong, so you basically go through everything. And then some groups came out with computer-based learning where, they would show you your score afterwards, but it really didn't do a whole lot beyond that. What Surgent Review is basically it not only tells you that there's something wrong with the car, but it tells you immediately what's wrong with it and tells you what you need to do to repair it. So instead of you having to, have it towed to a shop, you can pull the car over to the side of the road, and the computer would walk you through step by step what to do to make the repair right there on the road and keep driving again. That's essentially what the Surgent EA Review is doing. It isn't just telling you what you're scoring. It is telling you what you need to do to fix it, what you need to do to be scoring consistently to reach that, what is essentially a 70% or higher scoring on the exam to pass. All right, so that's the course. I wanted to give you a quick overview of that. We're going to go back to the PowerPoint here. So let's go back to my PowerPoint. Tony, again, does that say Surgent ASAP technology? Am I back on mine?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So we've addressed the software and the ASAP technology. So now let's talk about developing a study plan, not just a generic study plan, but how to pass this entire exam before the end of the year. Okay. So here's your 3 exam parts: Part 1, Part 3, and then Part 2. Tony, why do we make Part 2 the last part?
Well, it depends on the individual. Most tax preparers, their weakest suit is going to be business because they don't work with it that often. And in many cases, when we've talked with people, some of them have started with Part 2 because they figured if they took the hardest one and got it over with, they'd feel better. The problem is, most cases they failed it and never went back because then they got frustrated. Now, Sean and I have a tendency to disagree on the next statement, but it also depends on the individuals. I encourage people to do part 3 first because it's the simplest, it's the most common sense, and quite frankly, having it under your belt, all of a sudden you feel a little bit of energy to move on. People like yourself at Jackson Hewitt, you may come back and say, you know what, I'd rather do part 1. I work with individual, I'm comfortable, and it'll take me less time. I don't disagree. So parts 1 and 3 really depend on the individual. Part 2, if you happen to be a person who works a lot with corporations and partnerships and sub S's and I'm trying to think of the other part that's in there, trust and estates, then by all means, feel free to go for it. But in most cases, people find that to be the most difficult one. And you'll notice time of study is almost double and triple the other 2 parts. So that in and of itself is enough to tell you, I'd like to save that for the end. Now, I'll add one other comment right now so I don't forget it. This is a very unique year. And all of you have come off your 2017 tax preparation. So you're in a good shape to go through and do this. When it gets toward November, you're going to be starting to gear up for the 2018 season, which means you're going to start looking at the new rules and regs. At this moment, the individual is not bad, although we have a tax bill playing around in Congress, which may come down and affect individuals some more. But the business side has changed dramatically. And even right now, we're trying to figure out how to change a lot of our questions. I would strongly encourage you, put the foot to the metal and get through these parts before Thanksgiving so that you're able to concentrate on your own work for the new year and the new tax law. That's just my spin on it.
I absolutely agree with that. This is a unique year in the EA exam, and it's still a very passable exam. I'm sure those of you looking at this are looking at the numbers right now and saying, "Oh, 165 hours, I could be ready for and pass all 3 parts." Yep, that's exactly right. So we get the 165 hours done before Thanksgiving will be even better for you. As far as the holistic view on part 1 versus part 3, I actually have softened in my old age now, and I actually think part 3 is a better one to start with as well. Because first of all of you basically have studied for part 1 because you went through the Jackson Hewitt Tax School. You know this content. Now it becomes a matter of taking what you learned and apply it into more of a theoretical environment, which is the old agent exam. So there's still studying involved, but it's going to be comfortable studying. It's not going to be uncomfortable. For that reason, I like getting part 3 out of the way first because it's practice procedures. It's the circular 230. It's just, I use this expression. It's a high school civics exam. You just got to study, memorize it, hold on to it for the test, and then get past it. But the number of areas you have to study is small. We don't have and don't require it to be a very big database. So look, only 354 questions. And so you get through it very quickly. So part 1 or part 3, take your choice, chicken or fish, it's all the same. But what we want you to do is when you look at these 3 exam parts and you look at the question count, so like part 1 is 644 questions, we're using data from students over 14 years now. And in the data, the students and this represents 80+% of our students, they've seen every multiple choice question about 2.5 times for part 1 and about 1.5 minutes per question. And that same number is pretty consistent with part 3 of the exam. 2.5 times per question and 1.5 minutes per question. So if you follow that math and you do the calculator and then take your number divided by 60 to translate into hours, it's giving you actually just under 45 hours for part 1 and just under 30 hours for part 3. Passing parts 1 and 3 is 2/3 of the test, but in reality, it's only about 50% of your climb up Everest, because part 2 is the biggest exam. It's the most difficult. It's got the lowest pass rate, which is to say it's not a very low pass, not a very low pass rate. It's a I would say a surprisingly high pass rate, probably in the 60%. But where it gets people is that it takes longer to study. So not only are there more questions, which Tony especially made sure we did in part 2 because we wanted to expose you to more content, but our students are averaging seeing each question 3 times instead of 2.5 times. And they're taking longer to read the explanation. So it's 2 minutes a question as opposed to 1.5 minutes per question. And so when I give you that time of 2 minutes, that's question comes up on the screen. You start reading the question, you look at the answer choices, you select the answer choice, the screen changes, tells you whether you're correct or incorrect, and then you start reading through the explanation and if necessary pulling open the IRS pub. That's about 2 minutes per question on part 2 of the exam and about 1.5 minutes in parts 1 and 3. Okay? So all in.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this, Sean. Those average study times that are listed here, these aren't numbers that we created. This is from the students that have used our course in the past, and we've had that information.
That's right. So so when our course is on CD-ROM, we require the students to send their scoring files back to us for our pass or refund guarantee. So we had captured the data back then. And then once we went online, we could capture the student data immediately. 80% plus of our students can fall into this 45, 30, and 90-hour time frame with their courses. Now, we have some students in that 20% group that either have just taken longer because they're just, they're more methodical, or they don't know the content as well, or they're not confident as they should be when they first start out, or they started a study session, saw something shiny like a quarter on the floor, or saw a new puppy like I would be and get distracted, and they let the session go for 20 minutes in the software, and then before they came back and realized they were in the middle of a deduction credits question that they forgot about. So those type of data points out there kind of skew it a little bit. So we're able to go in and anytime where we see an anomaly with a student, timing, then we can sift that out and then kind of look at the real facts there. Okay. All right. So let's say we're going to start with part 1, but again, this could be part 3. Okay. This is the breakout that you want to do. And folks, for all of you that have signed up for this webinar, we're going to mail this PowerPoint slides to you, so you'll have it. So if you're writing notes, bless you, but not necessary. All right. So week 1 is the assessment. Remember, I said it's roughly about 35% of the questions. So 150 questions. You're going to want to power through that. It's about 6 hours of study, 1.5 minutes per question, and then it gets it out. You could do that in 2 or 3 days if you wanted to, but we'll give you a week to do that. All right. So weeks 2 to 4, you're now in the study phase. So this is where you're doing the adaptive learning. But now we want you to do 60 questions a day, 5 days a week. So I'm giving you 2 days off. You choose whatever 2 days you want. But when you get to the end of week 4, you want to schedule your test at Prometric. Prometric is the testing center for the enrolled agent exam. So give that test date set. All right. So with the remaining 2 weeks, in week 5, you're going to go to that customized study. Remember where I showed you how to go in to a specific topic where you knew you were struggling? You're going to go in now, instead of doing adaptive learning, you're going to use the customized study where you're going to choose the topic and you're going to choose questions missed last time seen. That's pretty important. And then when you finish a study session, so let's say you did 25 questions in deductions and credits. When you finish that session, you're going to get this report, and this report will show you for every question you missed the IRS pub and page to go to. So it's a comprehensive report, and so you can use those reading lessons to know exactly where to go to the IRS pubs to read. So it might say pub 17, page 55, pub 17, page 82, publication, or pub 990, or what have you. So that's what you're doing. You're kind of, you've done the broad strokes before. Now you're going with a small paintbrush and you're You're doing the touch-ups during week 5. And then you get to week 6, you're a week before the actual exam. This is when you're going to do at least 2 practice exams. The first practice exam, don't even worry what the score is. We just want you to get used to, the idea of a 3-hour test with 100 questions. So do your first practice exam and then take a second practice exam in a couple of days. If you can see in a practice exam that you're scoring 85% or better, you're probably ready to go take your test, and you should be at that point ready to go. So you'll take the actual exam that same week as well. All right. So part 3, if you do that second, then you do that here. But if you can do it first, then that's fine. This is a 4-week study process. So kind of the same structure here. Week 1, you're going to get through the assessment, 6 hours, minute and a half per question, 60 questions per day for 3 days. Then you notice it's only 3 days because it's a smaller database. Week 2, this is when you're going to do the adaptive learning. So you're going to go into your study phase, let the software choose what you need to study. But you're only going to be your second week in before you're already scheduling your test at Prometric. So make sure you get that done. And the early scheduling is kind of important because, Prometric, you choose your location and then tells you, if you put in a zip code, what are the test centers that are nearby, and then you choose your date. And you're not just competing with people that are sitting for the A exam. Prometric is used for the Certified Management Accountant exam, the Certified Public Accountant exam, and about 1,000 other exams. So there are limited slots available for the longer tests like these are right here. So you want to get on that docket as soon as you can to get your test scheduled. Okay, then you get to week 3. That's when you can do the customized. Like I said, you're going to want to focus on those problem areas. And then user reading lessons that you're going to access. Mostly it's going to be the Pub 230. In this case, or Circular 230, because that's really where the ethics professional responsibilities is covered. But you're gonna want to make sure you're hitting up on that, because remember, this exam section. Tony, I don't know if you like the idea of me calling it like a high school civics exam, but you don't use Circular 230 on a day-to-day basis in your practice. It's kind of this, set of rules hanging over us, but it's not something you actively are applying, saying, well, this is page 9 of Circular 230. You're not doing it like that. So
now this is predominantly the ethics part of our profession, pure and simple. So you're looking at how many hours do you need in continuing education? When are you required to do it? What are you allowed? How can you advertise? It's all those kind of issues. And that's why I said it's the common sense part. You go through this once, and quite frankly, you're very confident. You look at it, you say, this is trivia, I can do it. And I agree.
Yeah, exactly. Trivia is a great way to describe it, Tony, and that's spot on. It's going to say the tax preparer did this, what's the penalty? The taxpayer did this, what's the penalty? You have to memorize the offenses versus the penalties for that are executed by Treasury. So it's just...
And also the new rules for e-filing.
Yeah.
That's one of the
very
big things.
Very true. Yeah. All right. So all that, folks, part 1, part 3, that's in everybody's wheelhouse. Anybody could pass. My wife has passed these 2 parts of the exam, and she's never done a tax return in her life. We just gave her the software and told her to study. She went and studied both parts quickly and passed both parts the first time. Part 2 is when the fun really begins, because this is where not only is it longer, but it's more content, and it's content you're not comfortable with. So this is where you have to really, really tighten the belt and say, this is where I'm going to earn my stripes for this exam. So this is an 8-week process, all right? First week, again, assessment, 6 hours, getting through the questions, but now it's going to be about 2 minutes per question. Weeks 2 through 6, so you're talking 5 weeks, so let's call it, over a month and a week. It's going to be just a grind of studying every day, 5 days a week, punching out the questions, 60 questions per day minimum. But if you can do more than 60, folks, do more than 60, because this is an exam where it's better to be ahead of you where you need to be in your studying than being behind and trying to race to catch up. Because racing to catch up on this exam is just, it's a losing proposition. you want to stay on target with your studying per day. Okay, and then at the end of week 6, schedule that test with Prometric. It doesn't matter which exam test you're taking. You're competing against people that are scheduling parts 1 and part 3 at the same time. So get that test scheduled. All right. So when you get to week 7, again, it's the customized sessions. Now, folks, I'm going to tell you that this could bleed into it being another week. So when I said before, when you're in weeks 2 through 6, try and get through it sooner if you can. That's because when you start going to the customized, where you're going to do focus studying on topics that you're struggling with, you might have a much larger array of topics where you're struggling when you get to week 7. And so because of that, it might take more than a week to get through that. So if you can power through it, the preliminary studying in weeks 2 through 6, where you're done, let's say, by the end of week 5, then that gives you 2 weeks really to do the customized study, and then still use week 8 to do your practice exam at least 2 times. And honestly, 3 times might even be better for this exam, because it's just so far outside of your comfort zone from what you're used to from other exams you've taken for the adult agent exam and just your work in general. And then you'll go sit for the practice exam. I mean, for the
other thing I would mention at this moment, if you look at it from a time horizon, you would be working on this in September and October. Summer is over. So, and it could be a little bit later in September, obviously, depending on your speed. But the fact of the matter is, you're outside of summer. So you have a little more flexibility, and definitely many of us would take Sunday off to watch the football games. But other than that, a little more ability to do this at that time of the year.
Right, and this study plan, folks, it factors in the fact that you're going to be doing extensions on September 15th and October 15th. We recognize that. So when we break out this study plan for part 2, which is normally when people are taking it is in that kind of that fall time frame, we factored in that you're going to have to be using part of your day to be able to do your real work, So the work that puts food on the table.
Right. Exactly.
All right. We've had another question pop up, so let me read that. How much does this course cost? Because the partnership your company has with Jackson, do we get a discount? You absolutely get a discount. In fact, folks, you get a huge discount. So when you get a chance, give your HR manager, if you have one for your office, a big hug, because collectively that group of people through Jackson Hewitt National negotiated a massive discount of 54% off the course, 54.9%. And we're gonna go to the actual pricing here in a minute. All right, so study plan. Saturdays and Sundays. If you don't want to study during the week and you want to just study on the weekends, we all said I'll do it this weekend. Understand that you can't study 5 hours straight. Studying 5 hours straight is counterproductive, because you'll get to about that 3rd hour and you won't be absorbing it anymore because you're just fatigued. So if you need to do your studying on the weekends, break it out so that you have like a morning session 2.5 hours and an evening session 2.5 hours. It'll be the same number of hours, but the retention will be substantially higher by going that route. If you're going to study during the week, keep in mind that you don't have to do all your studying all at once. You saw how I did 2 questions in the session and I exited. Break it out. It doesn't matter how you bulk it together. I mean, it's not until you get to the exam itself, the practice exam of 100 questions, you have to worry about trying to get through 100 questions. So, do 30 minutes at lunch, do an hour or 2 after dinner every night. And if you can punch it out more before the evening, that's less that you have to do that evening. But having done this now, exam prep I've done since 1987. And Tony and I, we've collectively done this EA review since 2004. We have students that come up to us at IRS tax forums that tell us they like getting up at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning before the kids are awake, before the world is awake, and knock out 30 questions with their morning coffee. And then they would do like another 20 or 30 questions at lunch. And then at night, you're not trying to get through 60 questions at a time. You can do 20, 30 questions only and still be at your 60 questions plus for the day and be ahead of it. So absolutely break that apart if you can. All right. So the key features of the Surgent ASAP technology, it's personalized. It creates study plans for each one of us. Like I said, if we all start at the same time with the assessment and we finish the assessment at the same time, basically seeing the same questions, once we move into the study phase, our distribution of questions for each of us would be entirely different because it makes you study what you don't know. It's making you focus more in those problem areas. We're not going to ignore the areas where you're doing well, but we're going to de-emphasize those and put more effort into the areas where you're really struggling. Okay? Kind of like, if I've got a house on fire and on top of that my rose bush is on fire, I'm not going to worry about the rose bush right now. I'm going to worry about the house. So this will save you, and I say dozens of hours of study time, but really, folks, can be hundreds of hours. Because when I look at our competitors out there that still don't understand this exam, they still have a textbook, which I will never understand, having now that I know this exam as well as I do. By the time you go through and read that textbook cover to cover, and then you do their linear approach, where you're going to start in the first category and the first topic and do those questions, and then the next category one at a time. By the time you get to the very end of the fifth category in part one of the exam, it could have been 6 or 7 weeks since you last saw questions in those early categories. And so what's happened? You've forgotten it because you haven't seen it that long. And so what happens when you forget it? You got to go back and read part of the book again. It becomes this kind of this vicious cycle of, you're juggling 4 balls in the air. You got to keep them all in the air. And if one drops, you're in trouble. So other courses out there, when we've done the math, it's 500 plus hours of study at a minimum to get through their course. That's why so many people take us so long to get through this exam, or they're giving up in the exam, is because they're trying to push a car up Everest that doesn't have any wheels. That's not the case here. Use our adaptive learning, and you'll know when you're ready to take the exam. All right, so we have a guarantee on this course. And we've had the same guarantee in place since we started this course on, early June 2014, or 2004?
2004.
Yeah. So we want you to answer every multiple choice question correctly at least one time. I don't care if you miss it 7 times, and on the 8th time you finally get it correct. If you get it correct, it's notched as being answered correctly at least one time. The second thing we want you to do is we want you to average at least 1 minute per question. So why a minute per question, not less than a minute, but more? Is because if you get a question wrong, we want you to take the time to read the explanation that Tony's provided. Like I said, Tony goes into great depth. Tony is a brilliant tax educator. Take advantage of what Tony knows. Let him teach you this content. And in doing that, it's going to take more than a minute. So take the time to read the explanations as to why the correct answer is in fact correct.
So I would also comment, for when Sean was demonstrating some of the questions, he happened to pick questions that had very lengthy responses. Not all questions have that length of a response. Some of them are quite short because it's obvious issues and you don't want to dwell on it. The ones that have longer ones intentionally are because those are areas that many of us were pretty sure of the answer, but there's those little caveats that, if this happens, then that's the answer. And sometimes those are the ones that we intentionally put in there just to bring it to your attention. Pure and simple. Yeah. Nothing more than that. So I don't want you to be assuming, oh my God, the length it'll take me to read. No. Nothing like that.
That's a good point, Tony. Very good point. All right. So when you go take the actual exam at a Prometric, you're going to know immediately after you click submit for scoring whether you pass or didn't pass. If you didn't pass, they're going to give you a scaled score. The minimum you can get is a 30. A passing score is 105. If you have 105 or higher, they're going to say pass. You'll have no idea what your actual score was. If it's less than that, so 104 or less, they're going to give you the scaled score. And then they'll give you a breakout of whether you were at, below, or above each of the topics tested on the exam, so for each of the major categories. And that part of the report is absolutely worthless. It doesn't tell you anything. If you happen to sit for the exam and you qualify for a guarantee and you didn't pass, then you would send your score report for Prometric to us within 30 days of taking the test, request a refund, and we'll refund your money for that review course section. So if you let's say you paid for a full course and you passed parts 1 and 2 and didn't pass part 3, we would give you a refund for 1/3 of the course. Now, having said that, we've issued less than 50 refunds for over, I said 40,000 exam sections. It's actually now 45,000 exam sections sold. And we haven't issued a refund. Starting in the end of July, it will be 3 years. We will not have issued a single refund in the past 2 years, 11 months, 2 years, 10 months on our past refund guarantee. That's how confident we are that having great content authored by Tony and great adaptive learning instructional design makes this a better course. And I can take anybody, I don't care if they've never done a tax return in their life. If they put in the work, I will get them past this exam if they put in the work. So that stat you see there, the final bullet point, is a testament to that fact. All right, so 54.9% discount on the course for Jackson employees. There's a free trial available, which we'll talk about in a minute. But if you go to this URL, surgent.com/partners/Jackson-Hewitt, you click on the course, either a full course or single section, and you click add to cart, it will be discounted down automatically. So our retail price is $499 for the full course, $489 per section. If you order the full course, it will discount from $499 down to $225. So $225 gets you our entire course. If you order the individual sections, those are retail for $189. So do roughly a 54.5% discount off of that. I want to say it's in the ballpark of $85, something like that, $89. If I'm remembering my math correctly here, probably not, but you'll see the discount. Most individuals, they never sign for the exam before they get all 3 parts from us. All right. So there's also a trial. Just because we have the course doesn't mean we want you to go out and buy it today. We want you to go in and test drive it. So you can get the actual course, the full course, and be able to use it for 3 days for free and take it for a test drive. So do some study sessions with it. Look at how we do the IRS publications. Get comfortable with it, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what the review course is. If you're not comfortable with it, you're not going to pass the exam. You have to be comfortable studying with it. You have to know that it's going to work for you. So for all those reasons, we want you to go in and access a demo. Okay? All right. So questions, you can email me. This is my contact information. As I said, we're gonna email this presentation to all of you so that you have it. But there's my contact information right there. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I don't see any more questions submitted here for the webinar. We answered the 2, so thank you, Jada. Thank you, Lisa, for your questions. We greatly appreciate it. I'm going to just leave the door open here for about another minute for folks to type in a question. There's one right there. Please put the website up again. Beverly, your wish is my command. So let's go back here. So Beverly, this is the website for signing up for the course and also the trial. Surgent.com/exam-prep/EA review. I'm sorry. This is where you go to sign up for the trial. let me say that again. This is where you go to sign up for the trial. And if you just go to surgent.com, you can navigate to the EA trial. And then surgent.com/partner/Jackson-Hewitt is where you go to order the course. So I'm going to look at your
sending these slides out today.
And I am sending them out. So,
okay.
Beverly, did you want to see the website up for the trial or the website to order the course? I'll let you type that answer in. While you're doing that, Valerie has a question, and Tony, I'll let you answer this one. If you're not very strong in business taxes, does this course teach what you need, or is it just a review?
It's going to do both. You know, the review is there. There's no question. But people who have very limited knowledge on business, there's enough of the, because of the number of problems, because of the focus, because of the explanations, individuals have been able to learn the adequate amount to pass the exam. Because the objective here is not to teach you business tax. If you want to learn business tax, you take a course. But if you need to know enough of it in order to pass the hurdle, that's what this course is designed to do. And, you know, I always hate to say, oh, yeah, it's going to teach you. It teaches you to pass the exam. And so far, we've had a number of people. It's been interesting. We go to the tax forums, and people will come up and say, I passed it. And almost all of them, their first response is, I work in the area of individual. I knew that without a problem. But business, you know, I just touch on it. So I think the answer is, yeah, it'll get you through it.
Yeah, and if you're going to do business returns as a whole, you're obviously going to want to take on as much training as possible to do that, just because of all the nuances. I mean, I owned a company,
especially next year.
Yeah, I owned a company for 14 years. I kind of begin to imagine all the nuances that went with our corporate returns. Okay,
I'm struggling with it right now. So,
somebody want to know what the cost is for testing through Prometric. So, with Prometric, there's a one-time $50 fee that you do to get to apply, and basically that's as an application. And then there's a testing fee. And so for each test that you take, the fee is increased. It's now $181.94. $181.94. So multiply that times 3. That puts you at about $550.
Yeah.
Folks, that's where the money's lost on this exam, not in our $225 course. It's the fees. Don't take this test until you're ready to pass. And that's why we want you to do these practice exams so that you'll know whether you're ready to pass or not. Beverly, I have the slide up that has the where to go to order the course. So hopefully we've got that covered. And then Letitia, you asked a question on the fees, which we've covered. So I think, oh, look at that. One more question. So we're going to make this the last one. When we sign up for the course, do we need to provide our JH employee ID? Just asking because many of us might not have that number memorized. And Prixie, the answer is no. All you have to do is go there, click on the course. Your discount's automatically applied. What we ask is you don't share that URL with your friends, because obviously this is discount pricing just for Jackson Hewitt. We don't want those H&R Block people getting this discount because they haven't earned it. Okay, Prixie, I hope I got your name correct there. All right, folks, thank you all very much for your time today. We appreciate it. I can tell you with great confidence that I am a giant evangelist for the enrolled agent exam. Not just because we offer a course, which we do, but I strongly believe that the enrolled agent credential is the preferred tax credential to have, because it allows you to represent clients in front of the IRS, which you cannot do unless you're an EA or a CPA or an attorney. When I say clients, I'm meaning anybody's clients. If I did Tony's taxes and I messed them up, and one of you is an enrolled agent, you could represent Tony in front of the IRS. If I did Tony's taxes and I messed them up and I had not done the minimum AFSP, I couldn't even represent Tony in that environment. But as an enrolled agent, you can represent anybody in front of the IRS, and you can represent them in any state in the country. Whereas if you're a CPA or an attorney, you have to be licensed in the state where you're going to practice. So, yeah, the EA credential, I think, is an awesome credential. I'm an evangelist for it, and I think it opens up a lot of doors, a lot of opportunities. I know Jackson Hewitt is really bullish on this credential. And that's why they negotiated such a great price for you all and why they put this webinar together today. So the price is right, the course is right, and the timing is right. Take this exam now, get it passed before the end of the year, head into 2019 as an enrolled agent. All right, folks, thank you all very much for your time today. We greatly appreciate it. We wish you all great success in your careers. And if you take the CP or the enrolled agent exam, good luck on that enrolled agent exam. Go get it passed.
Good luck with it.
Yeah, take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.